My name is Myra Archer, and I was 33 the Thanksgiving my mother handed me a $2 scratch ticket and called it everything I was worth. My sister had just unwrapped a Caribbean cruise, and the whole table was still laughing when that little card slid down beside my plate. I scratched it right there, next to the gravy, with a nickel my father flicked at me like a tip. What that ticket turned out to be worth stopped every fork in the room. But that is not the part that changed my life. What I did with it 40 days later is the part my mother will never forgive, and the part my sister still cannot say out loud. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where the quietest person at the table is the one you should never underestimate, and where the truth always finds its way into the light. If a story has ever made you feel a little less alone, you already know why you are here. Drop a comment, tell me where you are watching from, and be sure to subscribe. We did presents after the pie, the way we always had. My mother, Coralie, ran that part of the evening like a woman handing out grades. Delia went first, because Delia always went first. She peeled the tissue off a glossy folder and gasped, and there it was, a 7-day cruise for two, balconies and a spa, and a dinner at the captain's table. The aunts clapped. My father, Ronald, beamed like he had built the ship himself. Delia pressed the folder to her chest and said it was too much, and my mother said, "Nothing is too much for you, sweetheart." Then she turned to me. She did not hand me a folder. She held out a thin paper ticket, the kind you buy at a gas station counter, and she was already smiling before I took it. "For our Myra," she said, loud enough for the whole table. "A little something to match what she brings in." A few people chuckled, waiting. I looked down at the $2 scratcher in my palm, a cartoon pile of gold coins printed across the front. "It's all you're worth," my mother said, and the table broke open with laughter, warm and easy, like she had told a joke everyone already knew the ending to. Delia laughed the loudest. My father wiped his eyes. I sat very still and felt the old heat climb up my neck, the heat I had spent 30 years learning to swallow. I set the ticket down flat beside my plate. I did not push my chair back. I did not leave. Instead, I reached over, took the nickel my father had tossed me, and held it against the coating. Nobody noticed. They were still enjoying the joke. I started to scratch. You should understand what I was to these people before you decide how you feel about what came next. I was the one who showed up. For 3 years, I drove my father to his appointments, 40 minutes each way, and sat in the plastic chair reading donated magazines while the specialists tried to slow down what his kidneys were doing. When the electric bill went past due, I paid it and never mentioned it. When my mother's car needed a transmission, the money came from me, folded into a card that said, "Thinking of you," because a gift is easier to accept than help. I am a hospice nurse. I sit with people while they die, and I have learned that at the end nobody asks about your salary, but in my family, salary was the whole scoreboard. I told myself that if I just carried enough, covered enough, stayed reliable enough, they would eventually look up and see me. That was the deal I had made without anyone agreeing to it. I kept the receipts in a shoebox, not to hold over anyone, but because throwing them away felt like admitting they meant nothing. My sister sold houses and posted the closings online. I refilled morphine drivers and held hands that had stopped gripping back. One of those things got applause at Thanksgiving. The other one got a $2 ticket. I had watched this math my whole life, and never once said the sum out loud. I understood exactly what they thought I was worth. What I did not understand yet was how badly I still wanted them to be wrong. So I kept scratching. Slow, the nickel rasping against the coating while the laughter faded into forks and small talk. And then, my thumb stopped moving. There was only ever one person in that family who did not keep score, and she had been gone 2 years. My grandmother, Ruth, kept a cabin on Black Pine Lake, 2 hours north, a squat cedar box with a wood stove and a dock that leaned. Summers there were the only place I was not the reliable one. Ruth would hand me a coffee at dawn, and we would sit on the leaning dock and not talk, and it was the fullest I ever felt. She never asked what I earned. She asked what I had seen, and she listened to the answer. The last summer before she got sick, My mother mentioned my sister's new commission at dinner, and Ruth put down her fork. "Worth isn't a number, Myra," she said, right in front of everyone. "It's who shows up when there's nothing in it for them." My mother's jaw went tight. Delia looked at her phone. But my grandmother held my eyes across that table until I believed her, at least for the length of one breath. When she died, she left the cabin in a tangle, deeded in a way that let my parents manage it for the family, which mostly meant they had the keys and I had the memories. I had not been back since the funeral. I could not afford to keep it warm, and I could not bear to see it cold. Sitting at that Thanksgiving table with a nickel in my hand, I heard her voice as clearly as if she were beside me. "Worth isn't a number." My thumb had stopped. I looked down at what the coating had uncovered, and the number printed there did not make any sense at first. Before I tell you the number, let me tell you the room I was sitting in, because the number only means something against that room. My sister had leased a new SUV that fall. Black. The kind with 3 rows nobody needed. She parked it where the driveway met the street so you saw it first. Her house had a foyer built for photos, and she took them. All of us arranged and smiling under a chandelier she was still paying off. My parents loved her the way you love proof. When she walked in, my mother's whole face lifted, because Delia looked like the life they had wanted to be able to afford. When I walked in, my mother's face did a smaller thing, a quick recalculation, the look of someone tallying what you cost versus what you brought. That night, my aunt asked what I did again, and before I could answer, my mother said, "Myra wipes chins for a living," and laughed like it was affectionate. "I make a decent wage. I am not rich, and I will never be rich." And in that family, that made me a rounding error. I had spent years believing the problem was the amount. If I could just earn more, give more, close the gap, they would fold me into the warm center where Delia sat. It never occurred to me that the scoreboard itself was the problem, that a family which prices its children will always find one of them on clearance. I sat there with the ticket half scratched, and my hand not quite steady, and I told myself I was only finishing it to prove I did not care. That was a lie. I cared enormously. I dragged the nickel across the last silver square, and the cartoon coins gave way to a printed figure, and my breath went somewhere I could not follow it. I have sat with dying people and kept my face calm for their families. I know how to hold still when everything inside me is moving. So when the number came clear under the coating, I did not gasp. I read it 3 times. I checked it against the little legend in the corner, the row of prize tiers with the top one boxed and bolded. It matched. I set the nickel down very gently, the way you set down something that might go off. Across the table, my mother was mid-sentence about the cruise itinerary. Delia was showing my father the spa menu on her phone. Nobody was watching the joke gift anymore, which is exactly why the joke gift was watching them. "Myra?" my aunt said, because I had gone quiet in a way that was louder than talking. "Did you win a free ticket?" I looked up. I did not say the number. I have thought about that choice 100 times, and I still think it was the first honest thing I did all night. I slid the ticket under my hand and pressed my palm flat over it and said evenly, "I think I need to keep this one." My mother laughed, still not looking. "Oh, they never pay out on those," she said. "Frame it if it makes you feel better." But my aunt was looking at my face, and my aunt had known me long enough to read it. Her smile slipped. "Coralie," she said quietly. My mother finally turned. She saw my hand over the card. She saw whatever was happening behind my eyes, the thing I could not entirely hold down, and for one long second, the whole table caught the change like a draft moving through a house, the laughter thinning out, the forks going still, everyone sensing that something had shifted and no one yet knowing what. My mother's smile was still on her mouth. It had just stopped meaning anything. Here is the thing nobody warns you about sudden money. It does not change you. It changes everyone around you, and it does it fast enough to give you whiplash. "Well, what is it?" my mother said, and her voice had already moved, sliding from mockery into something buttery and careful. "Honey, don't be dramatic. Let us see." I kept my hand flat on the ticket. "It's a winner," I said. "That's all I know right now." Which was true. I did not yet know the rules, the taxes, the way you claim it. But my mother did not care about the rules. She cared about the ticket being on her table, in her house, close to her hands. You should let your father hold on to it, she said. Those things get lost. We'll keep it in the safe, and we'll all figure it out together, as a family. As a family. 2 hours earlier, a family was something I was worth $2 to. My father leaned in and said, "Sweetheart," a word he had not used on me since I was small, and it landed like a stranger touching my shoulder. Delia set down her phone and looked at me with an expression I had never once received from her, something that was almost respect and almost hunger, and I could not tell where one ended and the other began. I stood up. I picked up the ticket, folded it once along a crease it did not want, and slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket over my heart, where nobody's hands could reach without going through me. I'm going to head home, I said. And the strangeness of it was that their sudden warmth frightened me more than the cold ever had. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment across town, above a laundromat that ran warm through my floor all winter. I drove there with both hands on the wheel and the ticket humming against my chest the whole way. When I got inside, I did not turn on the lights. I sat at my little kitchen table, the one Ruth had given me, and I took the ticket out and laid it flat under the streetlight coming through the blinds. Then I did the one thing I did know to do. I found a pen and I signed the back, my full name, Myra Archer, in ink that would not lift. A signed ticket belongs to the person who signed it. I had read that somewhere, on the back of some other loser years ago. It's all you're worth, my mother's voice said, right on schedule, the way it had set itself in my head my whole life. But underneath it, quieter and older, my grandmother answered, "Worth isn't a number. It's who shows up when there's nothing in it for them." I sat with both of those voices for a long time. Then I made a decision that I want you to hear clearly, because everything after it grew from this one small root. I decided not to tell them the amount. Not out of revenge. Not yet. I told myself it was because I did not know the amount myself. Not really. Not after taxes and rules I had never had reason to learn. But that was only half the truth. The other half was this. For one night, for the first time in my life, I knew something about my own worth that my family did not get to weigh in on. And I was not ready to hand that back across the table. I put the ticket in a book on my shelf, and I did not sleep. And in the morning, I started making calls. The lawyer's name was Adrian Reyes, a small-town attorney with a storefront office between a dentist and a nail salon, the kind who does wills and closings and does not laugh at a woman who walks in holding a gas station ticket in a plastic bag. He looked at it, checked the number, checked the game, and got very calm in the way people get when they are trying not to spook you. "This is real," he said. "Top prize. $250,000. I sat in the client chair and did not move. He walked me through it plainly. It was a lump sum, not annual. The state would withhold taxes off the top, federal and state both, and when the dust settled, I would take home a little over $170,000. He also told me something I had not known, and it turned out to matter more than the money. In our state, the name of a winner is public record. Anyone can request it. If I claimed it in my own name, it would be in the paper, and my family would know the exact figure by Friday. "There is another way," he said. "We can form a trust and claim it through that. Your name stays off the record. You decide who knows what." I thought about my mother saying we'll figure it out together, as a family. I thought about the safe in my father's closet. "Set up the trust," I said. He nodded and started writing. Then he paused, pen up, and asked the only question that mattered. "Who gets to know the amount?" I looked out the window at the ordinary street, the dentist's sign, a woman parking her car. "Nobody," I said. "For now, nobody at all." He wrote that down too, though there was no form for it. The calls started before the trust paperwork was even signed. My mother had never called me on a weekday in her life. Now she called Monday, warm as a summer porch. I was just thinking about you, honey. We hardly talked at Thanksgiving. Come for supper Sunday, I'm doing the pot roast you like. I do not like her pot roast. Delia texted me a photo of Piper's school play and 3 heart emojis, out of nowhere, from a sister who usually forgot my birthday. My father called to ask how I was sleeping, as if he had ever wondered. I want to be fair. People are allowed to reach out. But I had spent my life reading rooms, and I could read this one. The warmth did not arrive when I was sad, or sick, or alone. It arrived the week a winning ticket went into my jacket. I sat with that, and it hurt in a specific way. The way it hurts when someone finally gives you the thing you begged for, and you can see the price tag still hanging off it. This was the proof, if I had ever needed it. Their love was not withheld because I was unlovable. It was withheld because I had been, in their ledger, a poor investment. Now the numbers had changed, and the affection had switched on like a porch light, automatic, indifferent to me. I went to the Sunday supper. I sat at the table where the joke had happened, and I watched my mother refill my glass before it was empty and call me sweetheart twice, and I understood that I was being courted. What I could not figure out yet was what, exactly, they were about to ask me for. I found out by accident, the way you find most true things in a family. I was clearing plates after the Sunday supper, being useful, because being useful was the only language I was fluent in. On the counter, half under a stack of coupons, was a credit card statement in my father's name. I was not snooping. It was face up, and my eyes are trained to catch numbers. There, in the middle of the page, was the charge. The cruise. $9,000, on my parents' card, dated the week before Thanksgiving. The gift they had clapped for, the gift that made my mother say nothing is too much for you, had gone straight onto a card they clearly could not pay, because the same statement showed a balance climbing toward the limit and a minimum payment circled in pen. I stood there with a gravy boat in my hand and felt the floor of the story shift under me. All my life I had believed my family was fine without me, comfortable, solid. That belief was the reason my quiet payments had felt like generosity instead of survival. But the house of proof my sister performed and my parents applauded was built on borrowed money, and the cruise was just the newest brick. They were not thriving. They were drowning in a way that looked like swimming, and they had been for years. And I had been the one quietly bailing without ever being told there was water in the boat. I set the gravy boat down. My mother came in, saw where my eyes were, and moved the coupons back over the statement with a smooth little motion, still smiling. "Leave those," she said lightly. "Come sit with your father." And I understood that the ask, when it came, was going to be enormous. 2 weeks before Christmas, my father collapsed in the kitchen. My mother called me first, before the ambulance even, which told me something about who they really called when it was real. I met them at the hospital. I know these hallways. I know the smell and the vending machines and the particular gray of the family waiting room at midnight. My father's kidneys, which had been limping along for years, had finally gone. End stage. The nephrologist used the careful words doctors use, but I heard the real ones underneath, and I translated them for my mother in the parking garage while she gripped my sleeve. He would need surgery, an access placement for dialysis, and soon. There would be more after that, likely for the rest of his life. And there would be a bill, a large one, the kind that does not care whether your foyer photographs well. I sat with my father while he slept, his hand cool in mine, the same hand that had flicked me a nickel 3 weeks before. I am a nurse. I could not hate a sick man in a bed, and I did not try. Whatever the ledger said, he was my father, and he was frightened, and I have never in my life been able to walk past frightened. But I also watched my mother in the hallway, on the phone, and I could hear the shape of her sentences even through the glass. She was not talking to the billing office. She was talking to someone about the timeline, about what could be sold, about keeping things looking all right until it was handled. The doctor came out and said the surgery needed a financial decision by the end of the week. My mother turned from the glass and looked at me, and for the first time she did not have to say sweetheart. Her whole face said it for her. The cabin came up 2 days later, and it came up the way a knife comes up out of a drawer, casually, handle first. We were in my parents' living room, my father home and tired, my mother making lists. "We've decided to let the lake place go," she said, not looking at me, writing something down. "It's just sitting there costing us. Ruth Ann knows a buyer. It'll help with your father's situation, and honestly, it's the practical thing." She said it like weather. The lake place. Ruth's cabin, the leaning dock, the wood stove, the only square of earth where I had ever felt like enough. They were going to sell it to a man Ruth Ann knew, quick and quiet, before the new year. I kept my face the way I keep it at bedsides. "How much are the back taxes?" I asked, because I had learned to ask about numbers instead of feelings. My mother's pen stopped. "How would you know there are back taxes?" I did not know. I had guessed, from the way people manage things they intend to unload. But her face confirmed it. The cabin was behind on taxes, a few years' worth, and rather than pay them, they would rather sell the whole thing and call it practical. $40,000, it turned out, stood between Ruth's cabin and a stranger. $40,000 was a number I could now, quietly, reach. I did not say that. I said I understood, and I helped my father to his chair, and I drove home with both hands on the wheel and my grandmother's voice getting louder the closer I got to my own front door. That night I did not sleep either. But this time it was not fear keeping me up. It was a plan. I drove up to Black Pine Lake alone, the Saturday before Christmas, on roads I had not taken since the funeral. The cabin was cold and shut. The dock leaning worse than I remembered, ice starting at the shallows. I still had a key. Not the legal kind, the real kind. The brass one Ruth had pressed into my palm the last summer. She was well, warm from her pocket. I had kept it on a string in a drawer for 2 years because throwing it away felt like a second funeral. I let myself in. The place smelled like wood smoke and cedar and her. I stood in the middle of the main room, and I could almost hear the coffee percolating, almost see her at the leaning dock waiting for me to stop being the reliable one and just sit. Worth isn't a number. It's who shows up when there's nothing in it for them. Standing there, holding that brass key, I finally understood what she had been trying to tell me my whole life. She had not been talking about my family. She had been talking about me. I was the one who showed up when there was nothing in it. That was not the thing that made me worthless. That was the whole of what I was worth, and it could not be printed on a ticket or charged to a card. I drove straight back to town and I called Adrian Reyes at home on a Sunday, and I said 4 things. Pay the back taxes on the Black Pine cabin, all of it, this week. Find out exactly who holds title and what it takes to secure it. Put it into a trust that my parents cannot touch, sell, or borrow against, and do it quietly. He was silent a moment. Then he said, "You understand that once we do this, there's no undoing it in a hurry. This isn't a thing you take back." I stood in my kitchen with the brass key still in my fist, warm now from my own hand, and I told him that was exactly the point. Delia called me the next evening, and for the first 20 minutes she was the sister I had wanted at 9 years old. She remembered a summer at the lake. She asked about my job and did not make it a joke. She said, "I don't think I ever told you how much it meant, you being there for Dad's appointments." And my throat did a treacherous thing, because I had waited my whole life to hear it. Then she got to it. "Things are tight for us right now," she said, "with the market and everything, and I hate even asking, but you seem to be doing okay lately, and family helps family, right?" There it was, the turn, so smooth I almost missed the hinge. The warmth had been the walk-up. The ask was the door. I told her I loved her, which was true, and that we would talk after Christmas, which was a way of saying not now without saying no. But then, in the background of the call, I heard a small voice. Piper, 8 years old, asking her mother who she was talking to. "It's Aunt Myra," Delia said, and Piper's whole voice lit up. "Can I say hi? Aunt Myra, are you coming to the lake this summer? You promised? Remember? You promised." I had promised, 2 years ago, at a funeral, the way you promise a grieving child anything. And I heard, in that bright, small voice, the one part of this family that had not yet learned to price people. Not yet. But she would. She was being raised inside the same ledger I was, and one day soon someone would hand her a $2 version of herself and teach her to laugh at it. Something in me set like concrete. Not her. Not if I could help it. My mother's next move was the most dangerous one, because it was aimed at the exact place I was weakest. She invited me to lunch, just the two of us, which had never once happened in my adult life. Over soup, she began gently to rewrite history. "You know that thing at Thanksgiving was only a joke," she said. "You've always been so sensitive, even as a little girl. We are so proud of you. We always have been. A nurse. Helping people. Your father and I say it all the time." I do not think they say it all the time. I do not think they said it once. But sitting across from my mother while she looked at me with soft eyes and called me proud of, I felt the old hunger rise up in me like water in a boat, and God help me, I wanted to believe it. I wanted it so badly my hands went cold. This is the part I need you to understand, because it is the part that almost undid me. I was not tempted by her, because I was foolish. I was tempted because I had spent 33 years starving, and she was finally holding out a plate, and it did not matter that I could see the strings on it. A starving person does not care that the bread is a trap. My mother reached across and covered my hand with hers. "We're family," she said. "We take care of each other. That's all your father and I want, to know we'll be taken care of. It's all you're worth," her voice from Thanksgiving whispered under this new soft one, and for one terrible second the two voices harmonized instead of clashing, and I nearly said yes to a question she had not even finished asking. I put down my spoon. I made myself breathe, and I asked her, quietly, exactly what taking care of them would cost. She had the number ready, which told me she had been carrying it into that lunch the whole time. Not the surgery, not just the back taxes, everything. My father's medical bills, the maxed-out card with the cruise on it, Delia's shortfall, the property she called family obligations, all of it swept into one soft sentence. "If you could just help us clear the slate," she said, "we could start fresh. As a family. You'd be the one who saved us." She let that sit, because she knew what she was doing. You'd be the one who saved us. It was the exact shape of the thing I had wanted my whole life, offered to me across a bowl of soup, and all it would cost was every dollar I had and the last 2 years of my grandmother's cabin. I need to stop the story here for a second, because I know some of you have sat at a table like this one, where the love only showed up after the money did, where being needed and being valued got tangled up until you couldn't tell them apart. If you've been there, you already know the question I was about to have to answer, and you know it does not have an easy side. Stay with me, because what I chose on Christmas Eve cost me more than any check ever could. Subscribe if you need to hear how a person walks out of a room like that with anything left, because sitting there, I did the math, the real math, and I realized the number she wanted was not a number I had. It was a hole with no bottom, and she was asking me to pour myself into it and call the falling love. They called it a family meeting. My mother phrased it around my father's health, which was the one card she knew I would never fold on. "We all need to sit down and talk about your father's care," she said. "And how do you say no to that? You don't. That is the whole design." So I went, the Tuesday before Christmas, to my parents' living room, and I found it staged like a small courtroom. My father in his chair, blanket over his knees, looking genuinely unwell, which made it worse, because his real illness was being used as the frame for something else entirely. Delia there with a folder, of course a folder, spreadsheets she had printed, the debts laid out in columns like a listing. My mother at the center, hands folded, the picture of a woman managing a crisis. They had built a whole room to make one thing feel inevitable: that I would pay. Not care for my father. Pay. There is a difference, and the difference is the entire story, and I watched them erase it in real time. Delia slid the folder toward me. "We just want to be transparent," she said, a word she had clearly practiced. "This is what it takes to get everyone stable." At the top of the spreadsheet was the surgery. Below it, sliding down into smaller and smaller fonts, was everything else. The cruise, the SUV that was somehow now a family expense, the cards, the cabin listed as an asset to be liquidated. My father's illness sat at the top of the page like a hostage. I looked at the columns for a long time, then I closed the folder, slid it back, and told them I needed a few days. And I drove to the hospital instead. The hospital billing office is on the second floor, past the gift shop, behind a door most families never willingly open. I open it for a living. I sat down across from a woman named Paula who had a candy dish and tired, kind eyes, and I told her I wanted to pay for a patient's upcoming surgery, in full, directly, today. She pulled up my father's account. I gave her the trust's information, the one Adrian had set up, and I paid for the access placement, the surgery, the follow-up dialysis package the social worker had flagged, all of it, straight to the hospital, straight to the care. Not a dollar of it went through my mother's hands. Not a dollar of it touched the folder or the spreadsheet or the slate she wanted cleared. I did it this way on purpose, and I want to be honest about why, because it is the whole hinge of who I decided to be. If I had written my mother a check, the money would have become hers, a lump of power to distribute, and my father's surgery would have been one line item she could shuffle beneath the cruise and the cards. But my father was sick, actually sick, and I am a nurse, and I will not let a frightened man go without care to make a point. So I gave the care, directly, on my terms. I bought my father a surgery, not my mother a save. Paula printed the confirmation and slid it across the candy dish, and I folded it into my coat, over my heart, in the same pocket where the ticket had ridden home from Thanksgiving. Then I drove to my parents' house to tell them what I had done, because they were going to find out, and I would rather they heard it from me. I did not expect gratitude. I got something else. My mother did not thank me. When I told her the surgery was paid, fully, directly to the hospital, her face did something I will never forget. It fell, and then it hardened, and then it got angry, in that order. And the order told me everything. "You did what?" she said. "Without talking to us? You just handed it to the hospital?" I said yes, that Dad's care was covered. All of it. That she never had to worry about that bill again. She should have wept with relief. Instead, she said, "That wasn't your decision to make." And I finally, fully understood the woman I was dealing with. She was not angry that I had paid. She was angry that I had paid the wrong way, in a way she could not touch. Money that went straight to my father's veins did nothing for the slate, the appearances, the folder, the control. She had not wanted her husband's surgery funded. She had wanted a lump sum in her hands to spread across the debts and the cruise and the leased proof in the driveway so that the family could keep looking like a family that did not need saving. My father's health had been the frame, never the picture. "The money should have come to us," she said, "so we could handle it properly, as a family." There it was, naked at last. To her, money was never about care. It was about control, and appearances, and the terrible arithmetic she had been running on all of us our whole lives. I looked at my sick father in his chair, and at my furious mother standing over him, and I understood that I had not just declined to write a check. I had refused to keep score by her rules, and she could feel the ground moving. She sat down then, all at once, like her strings had been cut, and for a moment she was not a villain. She was a tired woman of 63 on a worn sofa. "You don't know what it was like," she said quieter. "You never knew." And she told me, in pieces, about growing up in a house where the power got shut off in winter, where her mother counted coins on the table on Fridays and cried when it wasn't enough. She told me about being the girl in the reused coat, the one the other children priced at a glance and found cheap. "I promised myself," she said, "that my children would never be looked at like that. That we would always have enough. That we would look like we had enough. Because looking poor is how they decide you're worth nothing." And for one long breath, I loved her. And I grieved for the girl in the reused coat, and I understood exactly where the ledger in her head had been born. She was not the author of the scoreboard. She was its oldest victim, keeping score because someone had once kept score on her, and she had never been allowed to put the chalk down. I reached over and took her hand, and she let me for a moment. Then she turned her hand over, gripped mine, and said, in the same soft, broken voice, "So you understand why you have to help us, why you can't let us look like we've failed. Family takes care of family, Myra. You have the money now. It's the right thing to do." And just like that, the sympathy folded back into the demand, the way it always had. And I understood that her wound was real, and it still did not entitle her to mine. Understanding someone is not the same as owing them. I let go of her hand. Delia broke the day before Christmas Eve. She showed up at my apartment, no makeup, the black SUV parked crooked at the curb, and she cried in my doorway before she even got inside. It was worse than the spreadsheet had said. The house was in foreclosure. Her husband had moved into a friend's basement in October, and they had told no one, kept posting the photos, kept performing the life. "I don't know how to stop," she said, sitting on my thrift store couch with a mug she was not drinking from. "Everyone thinks we're fine. Mom raised us to make sure everyone thinks we're fine." And there it was. From the other daughter, the same machine that had priced me at $2 had priced her at a chandelier she could not afford, and it was eating her alive from the inside where no one could see. I had spent my whole life thinking Delia was the winner, and I was the loser in some contest our parents ran. Sitting there, watching her come apart, I finally saw that there had never been a winner. We had both been raised on the same lie, and it had just handed us different bills. "What about Piper?" I asked, because Piper was the only one of us not yet fully inside the machine. Delia looked up, and for the first time in the whole conversation she was not performing anything. "She's the only thing I did right," she whispered, "and I'm teaching her to be exactly like me." I did not have money enough to save my sister from herself. Nobody does. But sitting on that couch, I made a decision about the one person in this family who could still be saved, and it had nothing to do with a check. I went to my parents' house on the morning of Christmas Eve, before the extended family arrived, because some things you do not do in front of an audience. I found my mother in the kitchen and my father at the table, and I told them plainly. "The back taxes on the cabin are paid," I said. "All of them. And the cabin is in a trust now. It can't be sold, or borrowed against, or listed. It's protected. Grandma's place stays in the family, but not the way you meant." My mother went very still. "You did that behind our backs?" I said yes, the same way she had done a great many things behind mine. Then I said the second thing, the one there was no walking back from. "I'm not going to give you the money to clear the slate. I paid Dad's surgery, all of his care directly, and I'll always make sure he has care. But I'm not writing a check to make the family look like it never struggled. I'm not selling Grandma's cabin. And I'm done paying to sit at this table." The kitchen went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator. My mother's voice came out flat and cold. "After everything we've done for you." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was such a clean summary of the whole con, everything they had done for me. I could have listed what I had done for them, 3 years of dialysis drives and overdue bills and quiet transfers folded into cards. I did not. Listing it would have meant I still thought worth was a tally, and I was finally done thinking that. I just said, "I love you, and I'm not doing this anymore." My father looked at his hands. My mother looked at me like I had become a stranger, which, in the only way that mattered, I finally had. The old Myra, the one who paid for love, did not walk back out of that kitchen. Somebody new did. My mother followed me to the door, and she delivered the ultimatum on the porch, in the cold, where the neighbors could have heard if they were listening. "You listen to me," she said. "The family is here tonight. Everyone. Your aunts, your cousins. Your father is sick and your sister is losing her house, and you are sitting on a fortune, being selfish. So here is what happens. Tonight, in front of everyone, you make this right. You write the check, you let the cabin go, you do your part. Or you don't, and you are not part of this family anymore. It is that simple. Choose." Then she went back inside to arrange the good plates. I stood on the porch a long moment. I want to stop the story right here, because everything in me wanted to fold. Saying yes meant they would finally want me, finally fold me into the warm center, finally hand me the seat I had been trying to buy my whole life. If you have ever paid for a place at your own family's table, you understand exactly how strong that pull is. It is not weakness. It is 30 years of hunger with a plate finally in front of you. What I chose that night, a few hours later in front of everyone, cost me more than any amount of money, and I have never once regretted it, and I have never once stopped grieving it, both at the same time. Comment worth it if you have ever had to choose yourself over the people who were supposed to choose you first, because when I walked into that living room on Christmas Eve, I already knew what I was going to do. I just did not yet know I had the strength to do it. The house was full by 7. My Aunt Ruth Ann, my grandmother's sister, in her good sweater, 2 cousins and their spouses. Delia, holding herself together with hairspray, and Will, Piper in a red dress on the floor by the tree, sorting bows by color. My father in his chair near the fire, pale, a blanket over his knees, the surgery I had paid for 2 days away. Christmas music played low from a speaker on the mantel. It smelled like cinnamon and the ham my mother made when she wanted the evening to photograph well. It looked, to anyone walking in, like a family. My mother waited until the plates were cleared and the coffee was poured, the exact rhythm of Thanksgiving, and I understood she had chosen the timing on purpose. Presence and reckoning time. She stood, tapped her cup with a spoon, and got the room's attention with the ease of a woman who had been running tables her whole life. "Before we do gifts," she said warmly, "I think it's a good time to talk, as a family, about how we all pull together when times are hard." She looked at me. The whole room, following her eyes, looked at me. She had built the stage exactly the way she wanted it: the sick husband, the drowning daughter, the assembled witnesses, and the rich, ungrateful one put on the spot in front of everyone she had ever wanted to impress. It was a good trap. It was the best trap she had ever built. Piper looked up from her bows, sensing the shift the way children do. And I set my coffee down, and I felt, instead of fear, a strange and total calm. The calm I feel at bedsides, when the hardest moment arrives, and someone has to be steady. I stood up, because you should be standing when you say the truest thing you will ever say. "You're right," I told my mother, and I watched hope flicker across her face, because she thought I was folding. "We should talk about how a family pulls together. So let me tell you what I've done." I kept my voice level, the bedside voice, the one that does not shake even when everything is ending. Dad's surgery is paid for, all of it, and his dialysis, and his care going forward. I paid the hospital directly, this week. Dad, you don't ever have to worry about that. You're taken care of. My father's eyes came up, wet. And Grandma's cabin is safe. The back taxes are cleared, and it's in a trust now, so it can never be sold. "Piper," I said, and the little girl looked up from her bows. "You and I are going to the lake this summer. I promised, and I keep my promises." Then I turned back to my mother and I said the rest, gently, which is the only way to say something this sharp. "But I'm not writing the check. I'm not clearing the slate. I'm not going to hand over money so this family can keep looking like it never struggled, because that isn't care, Mom. That's a costume. And I'm done paying for the costume." My mother's face went white, then red. "How dare you?" she started, her voice climbing. "After everything. In front of everyone, you selfish—" And she was loud now. Loud in her own living room in front of the aunts and the cousins. The exact thing she had spent her whole life spending money to avoid. I did not raise my voice to meet hers. I reached into my pocket and I took out the thing I had brought, and I set it on the coffee table where everyone could see. It was the ticket. The $2 scratcher, sealed now in a little plastic sleeve, the cartoon coins and the winning number. I put it down flat, like a period at the end of a sentence. "You told me this was all I was worth," I said, into the ringing quiet. "You were wrong about the number. But you were wrong about a bigger thing, too." I looked at her, calm, unbroken, finally free. "You put a price on me the day I stopped being for sale." And I understood, even as I said it, that in winning this I was losing them, all of them, and that both things were true at once, and neither one would let go of the other. The room did not erupt. It went quiet, which was worse. The particular quiet of people who have just watched a family break along a seam they always suspected was there. Ruth Ann looked at the ticket on the table, then at my mother, and her mouth pressed into a line that said she had heard my grandmother's voice in the room too. My mother's hands were shaking. "If you walk out of here without helping this family," she said, low and final, "then you are not my daughter." She meant it as the killing blow. The thing was, she had been aiming that weapon at me my whole life, and this was the first time I did not flinch. "I know you believe that," I said. "That's the saddest part." And I felt it land in me, all of it, the full weight of what I was choosing. I was not going to get the warm center. I was never going to get it, because it had never existed. It was a photograph of a thing, and I had finally stopped trying to buy my way into a picture. I had won. I had kept my grandmother's cabin, protected my father's care, held my own worth in my own two hands. And I had lost my family in the same breath, the real loss and the real freedom arriving together, inseparable, like they had been waiting to come as a pair. "Worth isn't a number," Ruth said, one last time, from wherever she was. "It's who shows up when there's nothing in it for them." I had shown up my whole life. Tonight, for the first time, I showed up for myself. It did not feel like victory. It felt like grief, and like air, and I have since learned that sometimes those are the same thing. I did one more thing before I left, and it was the only thing that night that felt entirely like joy. I crossed the room and knelt down by the tree where Piper sat in her red dress, still holding a green bow, her eyes big because she had felt the whole storm move through the room without understanding a word of it. I took the brass key out of my pocket, the one from Ruth's palm, warm now from my own, and I closed her small hand around it. "This is the key to Grandma Ruth's cabin on the lake," I said, just for her. "It's safe now, and it's going to stay safe, and it's yours to visit whenever you want, for the rest of your life. There's a dock that leans and a stove that pops, and coffee at sunrise if you're brave enough to get up. Nobody there will ever ask what you're worth, okay?" She looked at the key, then at me, and she asked the only question that mattered to an 8-year-old. "Are you going to be there?" And I said yes. Every summer. I promise. She threw her arms around my neck, key and bow and all, and over her shoulder I saw Delia watching us with tears running straight down through her careful face, and I understood that I had just handed the next generation a different scoreboard, one small brass key at a time. Then I stood up, and I got my coat, and I walked toward the door of that house for the last time as the person I used to be. Nobody stopped me at the door. My mother had turned away, already rearranging the evening in her mind, already deciding how she would tell the story so that I was the villain and she was the wounded one, and honestly, let her. I have stopped needing to win that. My father said my name once, quietly, from his chair. Just Myra. Not sweetheart, my actual name, the one my grandmother used. I do not know everything that was in it, regret or love or only fear, and I have made my peace with not knowing. I put my hand on his shoulder for a moment on my way past, because he was a sick man in a chair, and I am who I am. Then I opened the door and stepped out into the cold. The snow had started, fine and quiet, catching the porch light. I walked down the steps I had climbed my whole life carrying something for somebody, and this time my hands were empty and my chest was full. I got in my car. I did not look back at the window. I drove, both hands on the wheel, past the black SUV at the curb, out of the neighborhood, and the further I got the lighter I became, until somewhere around the edge of town I realized I was breathing all the way to the bottom of my lungs for the first time in 33 years. That was 7 months ago. Let me tell you where things landed, because life does not tie itself in bows, and I would not trust me if I said it did. My father had his surgery. It went well. He is on dialysis 3 days a week, and sometimes I drive him. because being estranged from my mother turned out not to change what kind of daughter I am to a sick man. We do not talk about Christmas Eve. We talk about the road and the weather. And it is thin, but it is real. And it is mine to give on my own terms now, not a payment on a debt. My mother and I have not spoken. She tells people I abandoned the family in its hour of need, that I chose money over blood. And some of them believe her, because the ledger is comfortable and the truth is not. I have stopped trying to correct the record. Some people will only ever read you as a number, and you cannot argue a person out of a language they think in. Delia lost the house, but she moved into a small rental with Piper, and she took down the photos, all of them. And the last time we talked, she said the strangest thing had happened, that with nothing left to perform, she had started to feel almost okay. We are not close, exactly. We are something newer than that, two women learning a language our mother never taught us. And the cabin. The cabin at Black Pine Lake stands paid for and protected, the dock still leaning, the stove still popping. I go up most weekends now. I fix the screen door. Piper came for the first weekend in June and slept 12 hours and caught a sunfish and cried when it was time to leave, and I told her the truest thing I know, which is that the lake would still be there, that it would always be there, that some things you never have to earn and never have to buy. My grandmother was right about all of it. Worth was never a number. It was always just who shows up. I used to think worth was something my family could hand me across a table, a cruise or a check or a $2 joke, and it took a signed ticket and a lost family and a leaning dock to finally teach me that worth was never theirs to give and never mine to buy back. That's my story. A $2 ticket, a frozen room, and the night I stopped paying for a seat at a table that never had one for me. If there is someone in your life who only shows up when there is something in it for them, take this as your sign, because you were never the one who owed. Share this with the person who needs to hear it tonight. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.